Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan at MS Pierce. This is a frontline update for the Ukraine war for the 5th of April 2023. This is the second time lucky for the first half of this video because it came out mute for no discernible reasons. So hey ho. Right, let's go to the Kupiansk to Svatva to Kreminna axis here. And in the northeast, on my map, it looks like this. Not too much news coming out from pretty much anywhere around here. A little bit from Kuzmivka. The ISW says Russian mill bloggers claimed on April the 3rd that Russian forces attacked Ukrainian positions near the Zurivka Gully, so that's around Ploshchanka, and attacked Ukrainian positions near Kuzmivka. So Kuzmivka, Novoselivska is that ongoing fight. Kuzmivka is below the elevation of Novoselivska, and it could be that the Ukrainians have some kind of purchase on the western side of Kuzmivka. That's to the northwest of Svatva. But other than that, nothing really to report. There is fighting around the Zurivka Gully, which is going to be somewhere around this area between Ploshchanka and Chervono-Popivka. This is an area where the Ukrainians might have taken territory. There was geolocated footage of Ukrainians or Russians attacking Ukrainian positions, and the Ukrainian positions were to the east of the Russian line. That's according to the ISW. You've got no confirmation of that elsewhere. Other than that, there's unsuccessful attacks near or towards Nevska, Torska, many of the usual places, Bilarivka, so on and so forth. Just to show you on my map, so you've got Nevska's up there, Torska's further down here. And then you've got the Serebryanska forest and Dubrova as well. Dubrova is also mentioned. But there's a couple of interesting bits to note here. A Ukrainian Eastern Group of Forces spokesperson Cherevati has stated that Russian conventional mobilized forces operating in this area are using more armored vehicles and act more cautiously in ground battles than Russian personnel in other sectors of the front line. Russian forces may be attempting to conserve forces around here ahead of an anticipated Ukrainian counteroffensive. There is perhaps geolocated footage that I talked about previously. The tank battle could signify a Ukrainian advance northeast of Vuhledar. But just around here, it seems to be the case, and not for the first time that this has been said, that the Russians are using combined arms a little bit more. They're more cautious, more doctrinal in their approach to warfare, as opposed to throwing like human waves of convicts and the sorts of things that we have seen, but not exclusively in Bakhmut. Well, exclusively in Bakhmut, I guess, but they use lots of different techniques in Bakhmut. It isn't just waves of human waves of convicts being thrown at a problem. But anyway, it's more cautious around here, and it could be a sign that they are expecting a counter-offensive in that area. And it could also be that the Ukrainians have made advances in the Vuhledar area, just northeast of there. I haven't changed the maps at all, but there was that tank battle that there was some pretty incredible footage of, and that's in this general area, so that there could be some advances there. Other than that, we are coming down to the Bakhmut area, so let's get a handle of what's going on there. Let's go first, I guess, to Syriac maps. Shows that there are some advances in the sort of eastern areas. They say in Bakhmut city took full control over the Azom industrial complex, reaching hospital area from there. In addition, troops reached the Metallurg Stadium after the capture school number 11 and Rizdivana Street from the southern axis. This then looks like for Rebar, they say in Bakhmut, Wagner assault detachments completely liberated the territory of the industrial complex again, and the railway station Bakhmut 1 and other quarters east of Mira Street. The positions of the AFU in Bohdonivka cover the flank of the Ukrainian grouping Chasiv Yar, and the loss of control over this suburb will significantly affect the logistical capabilities of the AFU along the road through Kromova. The command of the AFU is trying with all its might to hold the line from Bohdonivka to Hryvivka in order to prevent a breakthrough of the defence in the north. And that is to say that this area here, if that breaks from there to Bohdonivka, then Kromova is in trouble. So absolutely, but basically that it's this area of the Azom plant here, and then next to the Metallurg Stadium there. They also go on to say, and this is basically all they say, the whole front line, it ends with Bakhmut. In the central districts, the fighting is gradually shifting to the west. In the course of their advance, the Wagner PMC assault groups entrenched on Alexandra Sibirska Street, Sibirtseva Street, and near the Metallurg Stadium, and also occupied the building of Score Number 11. To the south, Russian forward units are fighting street battles near Rizdiviana Street and the Avanhard Stadium. Despite heavy losses, the Ukrainian units continue to hold the defense line in this area. So there are two stadiums. There's another stadium just down here where there's fighting close to there. Now, if you look at my map, I haven't moved the Ukrainian lines because I just wanted to show you where the areas that there have been advances. That is broadly in the east. It could be that the Ukrainians are pretty much consigned to defending along the railway line there, and they will basically concede this area here. The idea is that no matter what you think about Bakhmut, you can argue that it's a success for the Ukrainians. Now, the pro-Russians say, oh, look at this cope, it's ridiculous cope. The point is that it has no real intrinsic value anymore, Bakhmut. The only value it has is in attriting the Russian troops and keeping them fixed there. So if they can concede this territory, the whole town, whilst attriting at the rate that they have been, and fixing the Russian troops, then that is a success. It's a Pyrrhic victory for the Russians if they take Bakhmut. That's the point. If it leaves them more vulnerable after they have Bakhmut than they were before, then this will be a successful maneuver for the Ukrainians. Yes, it would have cost them a lot of lives, but the point is it's cost the Russians even more, and it's left them vulnerable to a counterattack. So that would be my assessment of the area. Russian mill bloggers claim, this is according to the ISW, on April the 3rd that Russian forces attacked. A Russian mill blogger claimed that Wagner fighters completely control central Bakhmut, although ISW has not observed visual confirmation of this claim. And it's unclear how the mill blogger defines central Bakhmut. Of course, I would always say similar sorts of things. It's all about definitions. Russian sources claim that Ukrainian forces are gradually transferring personnel to the western part of Bakhmut from elsewhere in the city, and that Wagner force fighters are currently probing Ukrainian defences in the city in search of the most favourable areas for future assaults. A Ukrainian withdrawal to secondary lines of defence in the city and a Wagner focus on probing attacks would likely result in a temporary decrease in Russian forces' operational tempo within Bakhmut. And it goes on to say, Russian source claimed that Russian forces transitioned to positional defensive attacks near Orikovo-Vasilivka in preparation for expected Ukrainian counterattacks. A Russian mill blogger claimed that recent Ukrainian counterattacks to push Wagner fighters away from Ivannivska and the T-0504 have been unsuccessful, and that there were conducted assaults, Russian assaults west of Klishchivka and Kurdyamivka. The Ukrainian General Staff reporting that Russians conducted unsuccessful offensive operations near Orikovo-Vasilivka, Bodanivka, and Ivannivska, and that the Russian forces conducted 32 attacks in the Bakhmut area, with 26 in the city itself. So that's only 6 attacks around the city, relatively small number of attacks elsewhere. Cherevati also reported that Russian conventional forces are continuing to reinforce Wagner fighters in the Bakhmut area because of the Wagner's extensive losses, likely in an effort to maintain Russian forces' current tempo of offensive operations in and around the city. So interesting that interesting that there's a Ukrainian counterattacks to push Wagner fighters still away from the southeast in the Ivannivska area. So there's still fighting there, although only 6 attacks. So those attacks are going to be somewhere around Orikovo-Vasilivka, probably somewhere around Bodanivka, Ivannivska, and then we've heard, Kurdyamivka as well. So, not a great amount of activity outside of the city. But yeah, that's the situation in the city. And as ever, the yellow lines represent the pro-Ukrainian map, deep state map, and the red lines represent the Russian map, or pro-Russian mappers Syriac maps. You can see there's still this discrepancy in the north. It's settled in the north, or at least there's been a stasis in the north and something of the same in the south. But we have the central area. Interestingly, a deep state map, the pro-Ukrainian mapper, is more generous to the Russians over these kind of 3 blocks here, whereas the Russian mapper has them further back, but has them further forward, north, and considerably to the south as well. Now, I showed you this video in my news segment this morning, but I think this is actually, so this is Kupiansk Street here. I think this mine clearing video footage is alongside these buildings there. It's almost like in an 8 shape. So if we go and look at this video, this is of a mine clearing deminer vehicle being used in an offensive manner. This has happened before. I think it's happened in Mariupol. These are UR-77 vehicles. All of the Ukrainians, 13 of these, at least 13 of them, have been captured off the Russians. They didn't start the war with any of these, and this has been used along Kherson Street in Bakhmut. The Tendar says that the Russians have been pushed back behind it, right? So he's saying that Russians are actually behind this road that goes sort of southwest to northeast here, and the Syriac maps has them quite considerably beyond that road. Deep State maps a little bit. Tendar is saying that they're back behind that, but this use of this weapon, if you like, I don't know exactly where it is. Let's have a little look. So it's being fired off from sort of high-rise buildings over here to come down and land, by the looks of it, by this figure of 8 set of vehicles. So it's a set of buildings, and that's a park area there. So I think it's as you can see, it's caused a lot of devastation. Yeah, Tendar said it's pulverized the enemy. I mean, how many troops were caught in that? It's hard to know whether they would have run into buildings, whether that would have affected people in buildings. I don't know, but it's an interesting use of that demining vehicle and the explosives that they use to clear away the mines, and it would have caused certainly some issue for the Russians there. So it looks like that was fired from here, somewhere around here, to lie down here and exploded along there, where one would assume there would have been Russian troops gathering or something of that sort. So that is the situation there. Interesting video footage. We have War Monitor saying that there are Ukrainian artillery along with infantry were repelled repelled a large assault of Russian forces east of Vasilivka, so that's in that northerly area. But also that Ukrainian artillery hit and destroyed a base of Russian forces in Ozaryanivka, south of Bakhmut. So this isn't Ukrainian forces, but Ukrainian artillery hitting Ozaryanivka, or an area there, Russian base. And we heard from, I'd advise you watch reporting from Ukraine's really good video of the use of artillery in the area. The Russians have been positioning their artillery to be able to hit all the way up here and also in the middle, in the center of Bakhmut. They have been hitting Ukrainian positions in the center, and that has caused a lot of problems for the Ukrainians. But they have positioned their own sort of M777 NATO artillery to hit the Russians in counterattacks. We have seen an uptick in Russian artillery being hit over the last week. I wonder whether some of these pieces have been taken out by the Ukrainians' counter battery usage. The Ukrainians appear to be precise with their artillery usage as well, and that's something I think mentioned by reporting from Ukraine too. So it's well worth looking at that video. It says quite a lot about what's going on in the Bakhmut area as far as artillery is concerned. So whether the Ukrainians will, decide to make their sort of defensive line down the railway track and try and hold Bakhmut in that way, it could well be the case. So although Ukraine are continually losing territory each day, as I keep saying, this is not like the end of the world. In fact, arguably, Ukraine have kind of won, and I use scare quotes here, and pro-Russians say, "Oh, you're coping," but the idea is that they need to fix troops here, and they need to trick troops at a rate that's preferential to the Ukrainians. So if they lose Bakhmut, if they've done that, then they'll lose Bakhmut but succeed. In other words, it becomes a Pyrrhic victory for the Russians. If they take Bakhmut and leave themselves more vulnerable to counterattack, or exhaust themselves, or don't have the capacity to do further operations, then that is a success for the Ukrainians. And the idea that if Bakhmut falls, then everywhere behind is going to be like dominoes. I mean, Gee whiz. You seeing how long it's taken, as I keep saying, it's taken the Russians 9 months to not take Bakhmut. What do you think is going to happen with Konstantinivka, with Chasiv Yar, with all of these places? And it's this idea that there's going to be just dominoes all the way back to Kiev, which is, do you know what, quite a long way away. It's like, do you actually believe that? Do you really believe that? And what I want to do now is challenge the Russian voices in my threads. The voices that are saying, and you know who you are, saying that said yesterday they will fall like dominoes. If that doesn't happen, and this is what really annoys me about people like McGregor and Ritter, Colonel McGregor and Scott Ritter, they make these claims that are just almost always utterly incorrect. Do they go back and correct them? Do they go and say, oh, do you know what? I was wrong. No, in fact, I heard from someone in my threads that one of those two, I don't know which one, has deleted all their old videos. Why? Well, I would suggest because they got all their claims and predictions utterly wrong. Utterly wrong. So if you're going to come to my threads and say, right, it's going to be dominoes after this. Bakhmut falls, it'll be dominoes. Put your money where your mouth is. Let's hold you to account for that claim. I wouldn't make such bold claims like this. I'm not sure what's going on in Bakhmut. My feeling is the Ukrainians are 50-50 going to lose Bakhmut, or they'll hold on to it in the western areas. But whatever happens, it has done the job that it was designed to do as a military decision, which is to attrit the Russian forces to a pretty catastrophic degree, or to a degree that is really preferential for the Ukrainians. Yes, they will have lost a lot. Will have lost a lot of troops as well, just not as many as the Russians. And so there you go. I'm going to hold you to account. Right. So a few other points. Andrew Perpetua yesterday had a really good load of maps on Bakhmut that I wanted to share yesterday and forgot in my map update. And actually now they're slightly out of date, but well worth having a little peek over. But he does say, brief update on Bakhmut. The fighting in the center of the city is horrific urban combat. Projectiles fly in every direction. Bullets, grenades, artillery, bombs. Identifying friend and foe is difficult and sometimes impossible. It's terrifying. Everything is trying to kill you. Yeah, just pretty horrible there. So as we come down south from Bakhmut past Toretsk and Sumy and New York, we come to Avdivka, which is very much like it's like Bakhmut 2.0 in many respects. If we look at the war map of Avdivka, it looks like this, which is no confirmed changes of control. If we go to ISW, it does say that there are a lot of attacks to the southwest, particularly pushing in Pervomaysky, Vodyanye area, around. So a lot of activity around here, but also in Novobakhmutivka, and it could well be a little bit. I've changed my lines. You can see a little bit there. Could be a claim of some pushing to the west by the Russians there. Deep State map has a little bit of change to their mapping in that direction. Well, actually, the ISW says that geolocated footage published on April the 4th indicates that Russian forces made marginal gains west of Novobakhmutivka, and they give this geolocation here. So I've copied that. I'm going to put it into my map. I've not done this. This is going to be live just to see where actually this is, and indeed it's exactly where I said it was. So that's good. That all kind of adds up. This is all about piecing together the bits of information to see whether what these claims are is true. Now, what is that? What does that pin that is in that position show us? Well, actually, the Russian positions were there, and the Ukrainians took them out with artillery. As far as I can work out, artillery of the 74th Jaeger Brigade destroyed the Russian stronghold from where the Russians were preparing to attack the Ukrainian positions. You can see those two tree lines there, and that is there. So that means that the Russians were there, they've been destroyed there, and they were going to launch an attack from there, was the claim. And that shows, so previous to that, the Russian lines were literally just the other side of those two bits of tree. So it is nothing like huge. As you can see, the line hasn't really moved that much. But anyway, that's a claim of there. A little bit of movement up there, but other than that, Avdivka looks pretty much as it did yesterday. Sorry, I forgot to talk you through no reports one of Bakhmut earlier, but anyway. And then it's all the usual places. Avdivka itself, Novokalinove, Krasnohorivka, Pervomaysky, Siverny, Avdivka itself, Novobakhmutivka, so on and so forth. Repelled attacks in all of these places up towards Severny there, and really all around. But as I say, no difference. And then we go back to the ISW. That's just the mention of Marinka again. Really doesn't get much more than a single word at the moment, even though fighting there is no doubt tough. Anyway, to just finish off what it says about other things northeast of Avdivka here from the ISW. So it says Ukrainian forces likely conducted a counterattack northeast of Avdivka. Geolocated footage published on April the 2nd, so it's a couple of days ago now, indicates that Ukrainian forces likely recaptured positions northwest of Novoselivka and advanced close to the settlement. It is unclear if Ukrainian forces still hold these positions or if Ukrainian forces conducted reconnaissance and force operations and subsequently left the area. So this is something else to be wary of, that you might see activity of a certain force in an area and think, right, they control that, but they've just done a little reconnaissance in force, do a bit of fighting, skirmishing, find out what's going on, and then hot-foot it back to your own lines. And then they don't control that area, but you might think that they do. So that is useful that they do point that out. A Russian mill blogger claimed on April the 3rd that Ukrainian forces are preparing for counterattacks in the Avdivka area after several unsuccessful counterattack attempts. So this is a somewhat successful counterattack attempt, as according to Ukrainians. Let's go and look at what that is. So the claim is from the same source, actually, Auditor here, giving a geolocation for that previous claim. And let's again check that out, put that new one in, and go and see where that is. And now we have... That's very interesting. Okay, so this is... I've not seen activity here for a long time. Novoselivka here, which is, quite... I say quite westerly, quite easterly from Alexandropol here, an area of quite a bit of grey zone. So that would be interesting if Ukrainian troops are operating around there and showing that actually they are moving forward. They are trying to attack at a time when they appear to be on the defensive everywhere else along the line. Perhaps the best form of defense is offense, you might say, or they are just finding out. They literally are just doing reconnaissance in force ahead of a counter-offensive or counter-attack, trying to find out information by sort of probing here and there. But that's quite a long way back, and that's worthy of note, I think. Right, okay, let's go on further down south of Avdivka. Again, not a huge amount to say as we come all the way down to Vuhledar. There are claims from Russian mill bloggers that the Russians have resumed attacks around Mikilska here to the southeast of Vuhledar. These are settlements that are on a lower elevation to Vuhledar, which sits on high ground that has a line of sight to these places. So you get quite a lot of spotting for artillery. You get ATGMs, anti-tank guided missiles, can be sent out of there, and these places are just littered with mines that are sent up by Ukrainian artillery that is effective and sits further back here. So it's a difficult nut for the Russians to crack. No gains there by the looks of it, and no real gains anywhere else on the front line as far as I can tell. The ISW says of the southern axis, Russian forces continue to prepare for a rumoured upcoming Ukrainian counteroffensive in the southern direction. The General Staff reported on April the 4th that Russian forces did not conduct offensive operations in the Kherson and Zaporizhia directions, but rather continue to build up their defensive capabilities. So I've said this over the last few days, it's all been about building up defensive fortifications, trenches, revetments, and all this kind of stuff in the Zaporizhia and Crimea areas. There were I reported this morning on the news that there were Ukrainian telegrams, so be careful about this. Ukrainian telegram claims that the Russians have ordered evacuations of Berdyansk ahead of a potential counteroffensive that is due to take place. But whether that is PSYOPs, I don't know. And then there's lots of talk about drones. Obviously, there were 14 out of 17 drones that were taken down just the other night, and they were sent predominantly against Odessa in the Mykolaiv Oblast, which is fairly near to here. So Odessa is just there when it turns up on the map. So Odessa. in the Mykolaiv Oblast. So yeah, that ISW sort of talks a lot more about that. Ukraine's Southern Operational Command reported on April the 4th that Russian forces struck agricultural territory and industrial areas in the Kherson city of Berislav with guided bombs from Su-35 aircraft. Russian forces conducted routine shelling along the axis as well. I reported this morning how there's been a significant uptick in the use of guided weapons by the Russians, released from aircraft. So this is near the Novikakhovka Dam. Once it turns up, so Berislav is there. So they are hitting targets with those bombs, and those bombs are fairly hefty, and they're obviously able to release them. They have technically up to a 50-kilometer range, but in order to get a 50-kilometer range on these things, it's like the JDAMs. If you're going to, if you want to use them at their maximum range, then you have to get higher to release them, and if you get higher to release them, then you're more susceptible to be hit by air defense systems. So that's your 50-kilometer range. So if you're a plane flying, you would have to release your bomb somewhere in that kind of radius, and that would hit Berislav, but you probably wouldn't release it that high, because as I say, you'll be more likely to get hit. So it may have been quite a close call for releasing those sort of munitions. Anyway, they are being used to a greater degree by the Russians, and we'd expect them to be used more by the Ukrainians as well, as they are getting delivered these JDAM and JDAM ER versions of this same kind of thing, which is attaching fins and guidance to dumb bombs, dumb munition. Anyway, that's the Frontline update for the 5th of April. Really appreciate you watching this. Please like, subscribe, and share. Thanks so much for your just amazing support, and thanks for supporting the channel, but more importantly, my guests' voluntary work. Please go and check out the live stream I did last night with Anastasia Perskova. I probably butchered that, but really enjoyed that interview. Go and check it out in the live section below. Anyway, take care. Speak soon.